Hello everyone, I'm Paradis and I have a master's degree in music. I'm really excited to discuss music from different regions of the world. Today we continue our journey into the fascinating history of musicology. Have you ever wondered how the study of music from different cultures began? In this episode, we delve into the roots of ethnomusicology, exploring the tools and methods that early scholars used to understand and examine the music of various regions. The focus on the music of ethnic groups really took off during the rise of Romantic nationalism in the late 18th century. This was a time when people began to believe that ethnic groups should govern their own territories. Do you think music played a role in forming national identities? It is an intriguing thought, right? One of the earliest advocates for this idea was Johann Herder, who believed in the importance of national spirit and rural traditions, including folk songs and melodies. What do you think Herder found so compelling about rural music? To dive deeper into the minds of rural communities, early musicologists started collecting folk songs from farmers. Imagine this, they used a five-line musical notation system to record these songs, which were then regarded as priceless cultural treasures. How do you think these collections influenced national pride and identity? These melodies weren't just preserved, they were actively used by composers to create national music in orchestral forms, symphonies, and operas. Think about it. How might these rural melodies have resonated with urban audiences? This political and cultural effort spurred extensive studies into traditional rural music, which had been shaped by urbanization, education, and industrialization. Many nations had their own prominent collectors and activists. For instance, Cecil Sharp and Wolfgang Williams in England, Nikolai Korsakov in Russia, and Bela Bartok and Zoltan Kodaly in Hungary were instrumental in preserving and promoting folk music. Can you imagine the dedication it took to collect and preserve these musical traditions? Fast forward to 1947, with the establishment of the United Nations, international collaborations in preserving and studying folk music became crucial. Folklore experts in Europe founded the International Folk Music Council (IFMC), which later became the International Council for Traditional Music (ICTM) in 1881. This organization has played a significant role in supporting researchers worldwide. How important do you think international cooperation is in preserving cultural heritage? The 1960s brought a new wave of interest in national music, especially as countries in Africa and elsewhere gained independence. Suddenly, musical forms and genres that had been overlooked were being studied and collaborated and celebrated. What kind of music do you think were rediscovered during this period? In the US, the focus on collecting traditional music wasn't really about nationalism. Instead, it was deeply tied to ethnomusicological studies, particularly those involving Native American music. Have you heard of Alice Fletcher? She studied anthropology at Harvard's Peabody Museum and conducted field research with the Lakota tribe in 1881. Imagine her dedication. She published over 40 monographs detailing the songs, dances, games, and stories of the Lakota people. What do you think drove her passion for this research? Another key figure was Frances Dinsmore, who studied music at Oberlin College. She made numerous recordings and wrote extensively about tribal musical traditions. Can you picture the painstaking process of recording music on wax cylinders back then? How do you think these early recordings have impacted our understanding of Native American music today? Now let's shift to Europe and the emergence of comparative musicology. In the late 19th century, Austrian researcher Adler published The Science of Music or Musicology, laying the groundwork for a new approach to study music. His work aimed to discover truths and expand beauty in music, dividing musicology into historical and systematic studies. Historical study focused on the history of art, while a systematic study included sub branches like music theory, aesthetics, and comparative musicology. Do you think Adler's division helped shape the field of musicology as we know it today? Interestingly, while musicology primarily referred to the study of European music history, ethnomusicology wasn't initially considered a sub branch. Comparative musicologists, often seen as psychologists, focused on folk music and were instrumental in studying indigenous music. What might have been their challenges in collecting and analyzing this music? The invention of the phonograph in 1877 was a game changer. It allowed researchers to record and study music from around the world. Did you know that anthropologist Walter Fuchs is usually credited with recording the first example of Native American music in 1890? How do you think this technology transformed the field of ethnomusicology? Nationalism also played a significant role in shaping national music. Early musicologists collected folk melodies to compose national music forms such as orchestral pieces and operas, reflecting the national spirit. Comparative musicologists relied on five fundamental principles. One, origins of music. Comparative musicologists were fascinated by the origins and history of music across different regions and cultures. They delved into how music evolved over time, examining its changes and transformations from ancient times to the present. What do you think might have influenced the formation and alternation of musical styles and instruments in different cultures? 2. Evolution of music. Another key focus was the evolution of musical elements. These scholars studied how pitch, mode, rhythm, harmony, form, instruments, and musical structures developed from simple to complex forms. For example, they looked at the progression from monophonic to polyphonic compositions. Do you think there is a global music that emerged from European art music as they believe? 3. Examination of musical styles and instruments worldwide. Comparative musicologists also explored the spread of musical styles and instruments around the world. They investigated whether an instrument invented in one place led to the variation elsewhere. They compared instruments from different regions, analyzing similarities and differences. According to the theory of cultural cycles, the more widespread a musical form, the older it is. What are your thoughts on this theory? 4. Analysis and comparison of musical styles. They didn't stop there. Analyzing and comparing various musical styles was another major task. They examined different genres, their characteristics, and cultural context. This helped them classify European music based on their findings. Have you ever noticed how different musical styles can reflect the cultures they came from? 5. Classification and evolution of musical phenomena such as modes and scales. Finally, these scholars focused on classifying and evaluating various musical phenomena like modes and scales. They wanted to understand how these elements develop in different cultures and what significance they held. How do you think understanding these elements can deepen our appreciation of music form around the world? Let's dive into the fascinating world of early musicology and see how musicologists of the past approached their studies. Ever wondered how the roots of music were explored and understood back then? Let's find out. Musicologists in the past were deeply interested in uncovering the origins of music. Influenced by Herbert Spencer's Darwin theories, they looked at how musical elements evolved from simple to complex forms. Spencer tried to demonstrate the progression of music, examining elements like pitch, mode, rhythm, harmony, and form. For instance, he explored the shift from multiple voices to single line melodies and from monophonic to polyphonic compositions. Do you think it's possible to trace a global music that emerged from European art music? Another intriguing aspect of their work was studying how musical features and instruments spread worldwide. Comparative musicologists investigated whether an instrument invented in one place influenced its variations in different regions. They look at the similarities and differences of instruments across the globe. Imagine tracing the journey of an instrument from its point of origin to various parts of the world. How might these journeys have influenced the evolution of music? One theory from German anthropologists of that era was the theory of cultural cycles. It suggests that the more widespread a musical form, the older it is. This theory used the concept of diffusion, claiming that the more dispersed a form is, the older it must be. What do you think of this idea? Does it make sense that older form of music would be more widespread? Comparative musicologists used various methods to study and write about music extensively. Their goal was to classify European music based on their findings. They relied on systems for comparing melodies and intervals as well as for classifying musical instruments. Interestingly, these methods are still used in contemporary musicology. Have you ever thought about how these classification systems help us understand music better? So I'm glad I could share this journey into the story of musicology with you. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and gained some new insights into music and musicology. I also hope I sparked your interest in this fascinating field. Please stay tuned for future episodes where we'll continue to explore the history of musicology. Stay healthy and happy.